can't hold it
No,
all in
that's
my,
right. It's
in
not.
my head.
You're not expected to. Okay, Lyndon, your turn.
Thanks. Thank you for the talk, Victor. My question is on something that you were talking
Can you
about.
speak up a bit?
Sorry, my question's on something that you were talking about.
Right.
Hume's eminence as an empiricist and
Yes.
his strong influence on subsequent empirical
Yes.
philosophers. In his early work, which you described, he pushed empiricism so far that it became sceptical.
Yes.
As he was saying, he claimed to have demolished causation
Yes.
and shown that induction would not work.
Yes.
And other empiricists have criticised him for that. That's pushing the doctrine so far that it makes it meaningless, that you can't demonstrate
Yes.
anything once you've wrecked causation
Yes.
and induction. Yet, in other works of his, he appears to abandon his own methodology. For instance, when you spoke about his approach to miracles,
Yes.
he talked about the laws of nature being of such a strong probability that
Yes.
they were nearly certain. Yet
Yes.
certainly, it seems to me, the Hume of the Treatise on Human Understanding, the work that makes his name, would strongly disagree with such a contention. So I was wondering how you explain those approaches to empiricism within, or what your views are of those approaches to
Yes.
empiricism within Hume.
Yeah. Now, did I actually get onto? See, a bit of the problem is that I didn't get onto the rest of this.
So you became overwhelmed. It could have been that you were dehydrated.
Yeah.
That's
I
as
was
far
a bit-
as you got.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Got your on
now,
so much.
this last one here gets on a little bit on that. Now, you start to have to get a bit technical, and David Hume talked about a priori and a posteriori factors, and I'm not sure that I'm even using the right word, but there are things which are a priori, and the problem is that this is a little bit bringing in Immanuel Kant.
Yes, I thought that might have been his
Yeah.
terminology.
Yes. The main thing that Hume really contributed was the question of cause and effect, and he argued that you see, from one of the Bacons, Francis Bacon, I think, Francis Bacon was saying that scientific knowledge comes about through induction, and so scientists go out there and gather a large number of facts, and then from that you make generalizations, and then you make an induction that the rest of nature is like so, because we've seen this, and then therefore you can say that what we don't know, you stretch it further out.
Like an opinion poll.
Now, I'm trying to think of an example.
The
For
black
some
swan.
reason my mind's not working the best today.
Victor, the black swan. Well, all the swans they knew about were white,
Yes,
and so they induced that all swans are white.
yes,
But then they came to Australia and they found black ones,
yes.
isn't it?
You-
That's
well,
induction.
you get this sort of thing, but what Hume was getting on about is that you can't really make any induction because you can never be absolutely certain about the nature of the world. And actually, it's a dispute that continues to this day. What I was trying to think of was the billiard ball example, because David Hume himself talks about the billiard ball. I'm pretty sure that's right.
So play
And so
billiards.
when you hit the ball with a cue, and that ball goes and hits the other ball, and the other ball moves off, and you say the first ball was the cause of the motion of the second ball,
No,
and
you were.
David Hume says that that's true because you just observe it, you see. It's sense experience. But what he was trying to get at was addressing the notion of cause. And he was saying that the first ball causes the second ball to move off. And And he's saying that you can never prove absolutely that that causal relationship is true. Now, you might do that experiment 100 times, 1,000 times, and the ball always moves off. But he was saying that it's possible that the next time you do it, it doesn't happen. Because the world is, you see, we know 2 and 2 equals 4 because we can define in our own minds that it's that. But when you're talking about something empirical, so our sense experience tells us that when the 2 balls hit, that they move off, and then we attribute that experience to cause and effect.
When it stops happening, you're in trouble.
Yeah, if it stops happening, you would be in trouble. But he was saying that there are certain things you cannot be. He's saying that ultimately you can't be certain that there is cause and effect. You only, obviously anybody in his right mind, and if you're going to function, you're going to have to assume. But he points out that the important fact is that you are making that assumption. It's something that you bring to the observation.
I follow that, but my question is, how is that his great contribution to the growth of empiricism? Because that's really a limit on the value of empiricism. How do you use
With the first person
empirical
people listen to
arguments
that,
to
yes,
try
you
to,
would say.
Yeah.
to
I
verify
was-
propositions?
I was hoping to show that today, but
And I mean, it's a common. Other people have made that
yes,
criticism.
Gillian.
Yes. Now we're just trying to. I was going back many thousands of years, and I was just thinking some of the questions you had there. Pre-Socrates philosophers, those questions were all there, starting on Thales and going quite a few of them. And it's more or less the same thing, isn't it?
In the kitchen.
And it's a very short question, and we're still wondering and asking about it. And it's all those thousands of years ago, and we still haven't sorted it out.
You are.
What's the question?
That's live, isn't it?
That's
The
right.
question is, does Victor... No, what question? No, Victor, I'm just making a statement. It's us, isn't it, human beings, if you don't mind me saying so.
Yes.
So what are
We
we?
were, what are we? We're animals, and that's all there is to it.
Is that the question? Okay, that's fine. I'm just
No, I've just asked a question.
John, you're next.
Okay.
Yes, John.
All right. I've sort of been listening to a lot of this stuff about empiricism and skepticism and so on, and my own layer on it is that the universe has a selective effect regardless of whether we acknowledge the universe or not. If we don't believe in the law of gravity or what our senses tell us, we will stumble off a cliff and kill ourselves, and we will not be alive to contemplate the nature of existence. So all the people who are puzzling over the nature of existence have been selected by the world. At the one level, we've been selected in that we accept the laws of gravity and certain concepts and what our senses tell us, and have not stumbled over a cliff and killed
Well,
ourselves.
you're talking Darwin now, aren't you?
At the same, yes, but basically you can also take it at a biological level and say that there is an evolutionary history to us that have brought us here, and basically we are the consequence of that evolutionary history. It's brought us here, and then we can puzzle over the world around us, but there's a selective effect that's brought us here, ignorant of the relationship that we have to the world, but basically it has selected for us being here to reflect on the fact that we can't make sense of things.
Okay, you want to respond?
Yes, I just wanted to rejoin that because that prompts me on this particular slide here. That bit about synthetic and causal relationship we were just talking about. Now,
No, I'm not.
this sort of is a bit of foreshadowing Immanual Kant, because there's actually 2 distinctions, and it's a bit convoluted how I'm connecting with you, John, but just bear with me just a minute, right? It's quite complicated. I find it difficult myself to hang on to it. There's the distinction of what's a priori and a posteriori, A priori is that it's purely logical, and a posteriori means that it comes from experience. It's evidence. It's a view that you come to after the event. But there's another distinction which Immanuel Kant brought out, which is equally important, and that's why you finish up with a table, because the two things Immanuel Kant thought that David Hume conflated. Kieran O'Hara, in the book, book about the Enlightenment, Beginner's Guide, pointed it out. There was a conflation. Hume made a conflation. So that's why I have a disagreement with the likes of Richard Dawkins, right? Now, maybe there should be a conflation. Maybe that this is not as simple as it made out. So this graph might itself be a bit controversial, okay, at a deep level. And that is the distinction between analytic and synthetic. Now, you make a judgment something is analytic, or you make a judgment it's synthetic. Sentences which are true by virtue of their meaning are analytic sentences. So a triangle has three sides is a true statement because of the definition of the words. Synthetics are sentences which require you to have experience of how the world works to recognise the truth and whether you give assent to it. And causal relationships belong, they're synthetic statements. They are certainly a posteriori, but Immanuel Kant also argued that it actually is also a priori. In other words, they are logical. A priori, up here, he says, is logical, and then a posteriori is empirical. But there are certain statements which are both empirical, so you would think they're a posteriori, but so they're synthetic, it takes experience to understand something is a fact, like the cat sat on the mat. But also, this bit here, like there's the statement that Newton came up with, there's universal gravitation. The statement of universal gravitation is actually, the way I think about it, it's synthetic, but it's not a priori. It's not just after the event. It's not just empirical. What we're wanting to say is that it's part of the structure of the universe. So there is such a thing as gravity. And you say that there is a thing as gravity without having to keep going, as David Hume tried to do, that one day there might be no gravity. The universe doesn't work like that. One day there will always be gravity. So we understand gravity because we experience it. I mean, you stand up and you trip over your bloody fall and you're flat in your face.
Victor,
There's also a relative thing.
Victor, just one follow-up. I guess my sentiment is the fact that there is something to generate sentences is a selective process. The universe has given us existence that we might generate sentences. So it's sort of like, where does the left-hand column come from? That's a selective effect of the universe that has imposed itself on us, regardless of how we interpret the universe.
Yes, okay. Well, just on that point, there was a piece of reading about Immanuel Kant that actually came up many years ago when Fred Esch was around, and I made this remark to him that there is an evolutionary process that happens that causes us to think in certain ways. Our minds flow in certain directions. It's a bit like Chomsky that says that there's deep language. If there weren't deep language, you wouldn't be able to. I mean, if somebody spoke to me in French, I don't know what they're talking about, but it's translatable, you see, and what comes out in that translation actually makes sense. That's that connects to what you're saying.
Yes.
And yeah, but I sorry.
So Victor, I did I wrote on a priori and a posteriori in either my honours master or the PhD doctorate, and I thought I understood it, but I don't. 6 by 5 is 30. Is logical, but to me, the cat's head on the mat, or the Earth orbits the Sun, is logical too. And so I can't understand how it fits under empirical when it's also under logical. I mean, the Earth orbits the Sun. There's no two ways about it.
There is a you've got to take into account that you are a modern mind, and you're shaped by our knowledge of the universe, and we just take it in our bones that the Earth goes around the Sun. But you've got to sort of, through a process of imagination, think what if you were living at the time when the church was in the dominance, and Galileo and Copernicus, their views hadn't really taken hold properly.
Yeah, I see. Okay.
Then it's you first have to do the empirical thing, but to make a judgment that something is synthetic and a priori, that's something. That's really something.
True.
Because normally you would say, if it's analytic, it's a priori.
Yeah.
Right? 6 by 5 is 30.
Right.
The cat's out on the mat is obviously synthetic. You've got to see a cat. You've got to see a map, and you've got a situation, and the cat sits on the map.
Sure.
It's in that sense, it's empirical. It's not. You can't.
It's a fact.
It's
Sure.
you pick it up through sense experience. If you didn't have eyes, you wouldn't be able to see,
Right.
and you could sort of feel it and you could work it out, right? So it's empirical because it comes through sense experience. This is where, when earlier I was talking about experience, it's important
Right.
that's what it is,
Right.
right?
Right.
But the real big step is the transfer of these statements, which you would think belong here,
Yeah.
to here.
Right.
That's the really big step.
Yes.
That transfer. That Immanual Kant wrote colossal, absolutely colossal stuff.
So have you got an example of a synthetic a priori statement?
Well, he's
It doesn't
shown them
seem
there. He's shown them there.
They're examples.
Where's the example in that? No. A
Certain
synthetic
empirical
a
actions which
priori
requires
statement.
experience to understand. Newton's theory of gravity, I haven't got it there.
Ah, okay. That's
Scientific statements.
Right. They're supposed to be.
And of course, scientific statements back then, you use those early examples to illustrate it. But scientific statements, I think I'm arguing this correctly, but you know, I'm struggling with this stuff myself. Are basically an expanding series of synthetic a priori statements. They're a priori.
Listen,
In other words, we're saying the structure of the universe
Don't put him down, Vicky.
has
Right?
gravity. Like Newton said,
Right.
there's gravity. Now you just think about it.
Well, does he go on posteriori and then come back to a priori?
Yeah,
or something?
yeah. But because it's a scientific advance,
Because
it's actually shifting.
Empirical stage to have the gravity.
It's synthetic. You know, we're talking about synthetic things. We're talking about matters of fact, not mathematics. So if you can't have analytic and a priori, right? Analytic is necessarily a priori, but synthetic, you would generally tend to say it's a posteriori. It's after the event. You see it, right? But after the event, you then make stuff. You see, because David Hume was saying that A causes B, and you have to keep repeating it, and it's always possible that something would happen, and you don't get that event, right? And Kant came along and said, no, there's certain statements that are not like that. They certainly are synthetic, and we learn about them a posteriori, but the nature of that statement, that there's universal gravitation, now where does that belong, you see? And it's a priori. it's logical. We're saying the nature of the universe has universal gravitation. And we say that almost without evidence. I mean, we, see, this is where in Bryce we start getting to it. I mean, just think about it. We can't actually get to
It
Jupiter.
doesn't sound uncontroversial, I have to say.
Yes.
Well, I have controversy with Ian.
Well,
Well, he's not here now,
I
so
mean,
let's